welcome to the American Reformation Podcast. Tim Allman here. I pray the joy of Jesus is your strength as we get the privilege of learning today with Kurt Rohrs. Let me tell you a little bit about Kurt. Kurt and I met actually at a Christianity, church, and politics kind of seminar that we hosted here at Christ Greenfield a couple months ago. And we talked two kingdom theology. We talked about the church in the world and the church's perspective toward an ever-shifting culture today, and especially as it relates to the next generation and parenting teens. So let me tell you why Kurt is wonderful to speak on this topic today. He is currently serving as a governing board member of the Chandler Unified School District, and he wants me to let you know he's appearing today representing his personal views, not those of the governing board. Kurt is a father of 3 children, all educated in Chandler's excellent schools. They've all gone to college. His oldest now is a professional, praise be to God. He has a passion for quality education, and as a parent was a regular speaker at district board meetings. He's also worked on the district citizens budget committee for 15 years. Praise God. Kurt also worked extensively with kids as a coach, and we share that. Kurt, I'm currently a football coach right now of my son's high school team as a coach for after-school sports, and volunteered at ICANN, tutoring as a homework assistant there. He was a certified substitute teacher and worked regularly in the Chandler Unified School District. Kurt is active as a public policy committee member, and he has, with the Chandler Chamber of Commerce, championing career development pathways for students. He's also a member of the Rotary Club. Shout out to Rotary. My grandpa, Kurt, was a big-time Rotarian, and praise be to God. Kurt attended a graduate degree in chemistry, holds an MBA in finance, and he's currently running his own business in Chandler as a financial advisor. So, Kurt, how you doing today, buddy? Thanks for taking the time on the podcast.
Well, good morning. It's nice to be here.
Good to be with you. So this is a standard opening question on the American Reformation Podcast. As you look at the broader church, you just said you were speaking at one of our larger churches here in the East Valley. As you look at the broader American Christian church, Kurt, how are you praying for Reformation, brother?
The Reformation, at least in this country, trying to research it a little bit, started about 100 years ago, but particularly for the same reasons that we're facing today: social disorder, violence in the community, and a lot of class divisions. I think it's about looking at liberty and freedom for people, particularly the freedom to practice your religion. So one thing I think that a lot of people misunderstand is that we have a First Amendment right to practice our religion without interference from the government. And that's the way the First Amendment actually reads. It's government not interfering in religion. It's not religion not interfering in government. And the last part of it is, I think, and I really appreciate you doing this, people need to start talking. I think they've been shut off from each other. There's a lot of cancel culture going on where certain points of view are just discouraged from being discussed. And a lot of those have to do with the American Christian church. So trying to push this forward and getting this conversation going again, I think, is extremely important.
So what do you attribute that kind of cancel culture to? Rise of social media, the tribal culture that can exist not just in the public sphere, but also in the Christian sphere as well. I'm in a denomination right now where we even struggle talking with one another around differences of opinion, maybe around how the church does worship or just practices their life in the community in general. We struggle to disagree agreeably today and to listen twice as much, 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? Listen twice as much as we speak. What do you attribute some of those struggles right now to? Because I think if you get down to just the everyday common man, like, I don't know that they're experiencing. I think they're just trying to make it, like, the family just caring for the next generation of kids. But then they look at the public sphere and it's like, why do leaders struggle to engage one another? I think it's a leadership problem, Kurt, to be quite honest. So I'd love to get your take on it.
A lot of, and people recognize this, that secularism has been pretty well established in the public schools. And a lot of this is a doctrine arising from, the political left. You might even say it's Marxist doctrine, who finds American Christianity itself to be a threat to what they're trying to push forward. So the greatest challenge is actually being able to speak about our beliefs and our fundamental approach to right and wrong. And we base that on the Bible. And you can't even say Bible in the schools anymore. So there's something very wrong, I think, with that. You know, the Bible is, in one sense, a historical document, but it's also a social document. So why would we have other social views being presented without presenting that one, which is probably the fundamental social view that founded the country? Good example is school prayer. Why can't there be prayer in schools? Okay, the government's not supposed to be interfering of the establishment of a religion or the free practice of religion, but they do. Most schools in this country were founded as religious schools, as the churches took the lead in educating children. So, greatest challenge, I think, is reestablishing our faith as a major force in our lives, and that it's actually a force for good and not discouraging it.
Yeah, amen. The government, and since our schools are run by the government has a responsibility to come underneath the fourth commandment, which is children honoring their father and mother. They work as an extension of the office of mother and father. And I think one of the things that frustrates folks is this rhetoric that we get to parent your kids. We know what's best for your kids, and this is where there's a lot of anger from a lot of parents when they don't know exactly what their kids are learning, nor even some of the choices, the indoctrination that's taken place in some of our schools. And I think I try to talk about this in a reasonable way, because I don't think anger, and I know you do as well, anger does not produce the righteousness of God. But we also have to be clear about where we see some gaps, and you're circumventing, overpowering maybe your realm. And you're stepping over and maybe on God's primary office, which is that office, especially in the horizontal realm, that office of mother and father, that office of the family. That is our primary vocation as children of God. Any comments there, though, Kurt, especially in the public sphere?
Well, two of them. So we're in Arizona, and Arizona state law says very specifically that parents have the right to direct the upbringing of the minor child. Okay, it's Arizona Revised Statute 1-601 and 602. It is state law that the parents raise the children. Okay, my second comment is that as educators, we're in the business of teaching kids how to read. Okay, we're not in the business of teaching kids how to live their lives. That I rely on the pastors of the church, no matter what church, to provide that leadership of teaching people, parents, and their children how to lead a righteous life. That's not for the schools to do. We do reading, writing, arithmetic, and prepare them to be productive adults. That does not include religions or even quasi-religions, like, say, a woke agenda would be. That's just not in our mandate. So I think we need to get back in our lane and let the churches do the raising of kids according to whatever moral and ethical principles that they need to do.
No, that's good. You mentioned the word woke. That gets thrown around quite precipitously in our culture today. Have you seen some woke, you say it's semi-religious movements, even in the Chandler district here in the East Valley of Phoenix?
Well, there are people that try to push, I guess, political and social doctrines in the schools. And that's and that's my point about getting outside your lane. Public schools should be neutral. It's just not our mandate to go do that. And that's why we rely on the churches to do that. They always have done that. Now, canceling that voice, I think, has been very detrimental, to the raising of children and reinforcing what parents want to do in the homes. It's not our job to reach in the home and raise the kid. It's just not. And I see that encroach from time to time, even though it seems to be a pushback now at this point that, public schools have gone too far with a lot of this. So I am kind of expecting, the pastors in the community to step up and show the leadership on working with parents and how to raise kids from that viewpoint.
Yeah, no, that's that's a big time call for us today. We have the privilege of walking alongside parents at all different ages and stages of development of their children. And we do not take, and I'm just speaking as a pastor in a local church, we do not take that responsibility lightly at all. It is our primary call to disciple the next generation, to grow up into functional, successful, if you will, contributing members of society. More than that, to have even a higher view, contributors to the expansion of God's kingdom that's filled with love and grace and passing on the faith in Jesus Christ, the crucified and risen one, to the next generation. Like, if we abdicate that responsibility, we are totally missing. Have you read the new book? It's new-ish, The Anxious Generation, Kurt?
I have heard of it. I haven't read it, but it seems to be a very popular book. And actually, I spoke on that yesterday at our parents group. And,
what'd you share?
Well, from the secular side and from the policy side, it's my view, and talking to a lot of people over the last few weeks about this, that social media is the main cause of teen anxiety and depression, because they're continually being bombarded by emotional and psychological manipulation by various people, either for the good or for the bad. Maybe they just want to sell their products. Maybe they want to push a certain point of view. Not really, isn't it? Kids, particularly young kids, do not have any defense against this. They're not adults. They don't know how to handle these things. They're easily influenced. I would say the second part is that social media addiction. And as I brought that concept up, people were starting to say, yeah, this has a lot of aspects of an addiction. You can't get them off it.
For sure.
It's delivered through the cell phone. So social media is the heroin, the cell phone is the needle. And trying to control cell phone usage may be one of the best parenting techniques to start fighting back against this. If your kids are on their cell phones all the time, they're being bombarded by other views that you may or may not like. But as a parent, it's your job to raise your children. And if you abdicate that responsibility, somebody else is going to do it. And that, I think, is what's going on right now. So we need to, I think, raise awareness on that might be the most useful thing.
100% agree. I use an app called Accountable to You. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's used to have, men maybe help. They may have a porn addiction or something like that. But it's a really good tool for me monitoring what sites my kids are coming to. And just this morning, I get this email that says questionable activity. And it was some goofy YouTube site. And I talked to my daughter about it. Like, she's not walked through that. And she goes, Dad, it just popped up. And I believe her, to be quite honest, the ad just popped up right in between her little teeny bopper show that she was watching. I mean, there is robust evil in the world. And I think that's one of the uniting comments today for the church. We have to identify what is false, what is evil, what is not helpful, and we must speak into it. A lot of times pastors, I think in the past, and I'm a historian, right? So I look back, I'm like, wow, a generation ago, 80 some years ago, pastors were confronted World War II and Hitler's Nazi, and I'm a Lutheran, right? So that there's a lot of Lutherans there in that context. We didn't speak about what was going on in culture, and maybe we did, but it was too little, too late. And I don't want that to be a part of our story. Like, I pray that pastors can talk about the issues of this day, the rise in anxiety, the abortion, murder, all of these cultural ills, and that we can stand on the law of God, but then move through the law of God to the grace of God, the new identity that is ours. We don't have to be governed by the ways of this world. We've been given the spirit of the crucified and risen Jesus, so we can metanoia, set our minds above, and leaders have to take the role right now to help people think clearly, parents think clearly, and parents to then set loving, clear boundaries for their kids about what human thriving is going to look like, heart, body, mind, and spirit. How can pastors, from your perspective, engage in public discourse in a helpful way, Kurt?
I think you need to support parents. And what came out of yesterday's discussion, is a very good discussion, was that as parents, you can't be afraid of your kids. Okay? Who's running the household here? the kid or you?
Facts.
No,
that's
and if
good.
you say, for instance, they get on their cell phones again and are doing things they probably shouldn't be doing, and you take that cell phone away. And a lot of parents are very afraid to do that because the kids will throw a fit, first of all, and I hate you, and go to their room and not talk to them for a week or whatever. That's part of parenting. And you can't be afraid of that. You need to take charge of what's going on in your own household. And for instance, I would say, getting back to cell phones again, there is no reason for a kid to be on their cell phone past 9 o'clock at night. Okay? There's no reason at all.
100%.
Because in talking to law enforcement, and believe me, local law enforcement is very much involved in this, because a lot of the crimes that are committed at the teenage level involve a cell phone somehow and social media somehow. So they see it as a very, very much of a threat. But they told me most of the predators online are online after 10 o'clock because they know the parents won't be monitoring the phone. And that's a very, very serious problem. So I would think with the pastors, getting parents together, having parents talk with one another and reinforce each other in the courage to start parenting your kids and getting back on the right path. Because right now, somebody else is parenting them and you don't know who they are.
Oh, that's so good. And have you seen a shift though in parenting over your lifetime from, parents being, and there's probably a pendulum here to a degree, like parents being very, very hard. I'm definitely not your friend. I'm here to set clear boundaries and raise you up. I'm kind of going to the other extreme. Whereas today, like maybe enmeshment is taking place. My identity is so tied to what my kids do. I think this is maybe the touch point that if I offend my kid, then man, are they gonna cancel me from their life? And maybe because the kids are so vulnerable, right? This anti-fragility that you can talk about. Our kids are so we don't want to do anything, say anything, or set any kind of boundary that could put them over the edge. And then you've got folks that say, well, look at the rise in suicide rates and mental health crisis. So I don't want to do anything to kind of tip them in that negative direction. Have you experienced kind of a shift of some sort, especially in the last since 2010, really, and the iPhone? Have you seen something substantial there, Kurt?
Yeah, COVID
as a father.
Yeah, the COVID was a big break in just. I think COVID was a big break in our just social experience, particularly our kids. Kids were home all the time, and then they were online. But one thing I brought up yesterday, and I'm going to reiterate that this is parents need to talk to each other. So if you as a parent set a rule, you can't be on your cell phone past 9 o'clock, and the parents of all your child's friends, you talk to them and say, yeah, we all have the same rule, then the kid can't come back and say, why are you picking on me? Because this is a general rule for all the parents in our parent group, and this is what we're going to enforce. So you're going to unite as parents to push back on this, and that's going to have a far greater effect than trying to do this one-on-one. And I think you get into the conflicts with kids because they're uniting against you. I can tell you right now. I think you need to unite against them. And they're being advised by people that find it's in their best interest to control your kid's life. And you can't let that happen. So use your other parents as friends. Talk about it. Don't be afraid to talk about it. And then I think, as you brought up, don't be afraid to parent your kids and take control of the household.
No, that's really, really helpful. Well, shout out to parent groups and maybe schools that say we're all going to stop having our kids be on their cell phone. 9 o'clock is the limit, the curfew. It's done. Man, wouldn't that be cool if a lot of schools and churches just kind of collectively, maybe all think about just doing that. The Christ Greenfield rule is no cell phone usage. Parents too. What would that look like? Parents too. After 9 o'clock, we don't lead by the law. We lead from love and freedom. But I think that would be a nice freedom-giving law that could be enacted in our respective communities. Thank you for that, Kurt. All right, coming down the home stretch here. Thank you for the generosity of time. As you look at Jesus, what's your favorite story of Jesus engaging in public kind of political discourse? And maybe a story that some folks wouldn't identify as public discourse, Kurt.
That's a really interesting question. I'm glad you asked because it actually came up yesterday in our discussion.
Oh, wow.
The favorite story, at least the one that I'm concentrating now, is the story of the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman at the well. When Jesus just walked up and asked for a drink. And she was very well aware that he was a Jew and she was a Samaritan, and they just did not talk. Very similar to some of the political discourse that we have here. People don't even talk to each other. They don't trust each other. They don't like each other. They assume the worst of each other. And he started a discourse and spoke to her. And at that point, his disciples would walk up and say, she's a Samaritan. Why are you talking to her? It's because I want to have her understand what we're trying to do. And in that conversation, convinced her that he was Jesus, yet he was the Son of God, and he was coming to deliver a message. And how did she respond? She ran down the hill to tell everyone in the village.
Told everybody, right.
Okay. So I thought that was a very, very powerful message and one that I reflect on quite a bit.
No, I think that's awesome. Jesus speaking truth to go on, both to Pharisees, the Jewish leaders, Sadducees, and then Herod, Pilate, right? You would have no authority unless it were given you from above. He places himself under the governing authorities all the way to the point of death for you and for me. Jesus spoke truth to power consistently. That's because he's God in the flesh, right? He had the courage to do it. So I think the same thing is true today, where families and pastors see things that are counter to God's word, that are leading away from human thriving, counter to God's laws that he embedded, not just in the 10 Commandments, but his law that was written on every human heart. We know we've been made to know what is good and how God created us to thrive. And maybe the last question, I think the gender struggle today, the LGBTQ plus conversation, is one of the foremost conversations that we need to have, because I think one of the greatest lies is God did not create you. Your mind and your emotions can say one thing, but your body says another thing. Now, I have a lot of empathy for young people who are struggling because the assault on the mind and our worldview is so pervasive today. But God created us male and female. In his image, he created us very distinctly that way. And there's a major lie today from the seed of Satan that leads us to question our primary identity. One, as a child of God, and then two, as we relate to the world, fearfully and wonderfully made as a male and a female. Any thoughts to that conversation?
Yeah, in two very particular ones. We have 42,000 kids in the Chandler District, second biggest district in the state. When I look at these kids, I see them all as CUSD kids. I don't care where they came from. Our job, like I said before, is to teach them to read, okay, not how to live their lives. That, the gender issues that we've been facing, I believe, are private family issues, okay? It's between the kid, their parent, and if they want to deal with the church as whatever counseling they go to get help with this, and it's a very difficult issue. That's a parenting choice, okay? They have the responsibility and the authority to do that, not the school. We're not going to reach into the home and counsel the kid as school employees. It's not our job. There is no mandate, either in law or ethically, that we do that. When I said stay in our lane, I meant stay in our lane. We're neutral on that. We're just there to teach them. They show up to school, we teach them to read. That's it.
That's good. I love that. I can't be neutral on it, but I appreciate your comment on it, to be sure, as we get to speak as leaders into the home, right? That is definitely the church's responsibility as families care for families and leaders lead in the family. So thank you so much for your generosity of time. I'm praying for you. We need more Jesus followers in all of our public school districts. I thank you for engaging in the discourse, for not being fearful of it, for using your gifts to bless the next generation in the Chandler School District. And I'm praying too, I get to lead a private school. I'm praying for more school choice. I'm praying that as competition rises, all boats rise, right? As we have a number of different schools there. We didn't even get into, we're kind of the wild west of school choice here with ACSTO and the ESA, the tax credits, all of those types of things. And praying that all of that continues as we all grow up into Jesus. And really everybody, I think in leadership, whether you're at a Chandler school board or a board member or just a parent or a pastor, we all want the same thing, I pray. For good to prevail over evil and for our kids to know they're loved and for them to grow up, heart, body, mind, spirit, to use their gifts to bless the next generation. You know, human beings are hardwired actually by God to care about things beyond themselves. Right? We were created heart, body, mind, spirit, and we care. You care. The reason you're doing this, you care about the next generation, the following generation after that, growing up to be godly women and men for the sake of the next generation that comes after them. We've got to stop thinking so individual, so time bound right now. We got to think beyond us right now. And this is why we have to have these Jesus-centered conversations centered in the truth of Jesus, how he created us to thrive this side of eternity. It's a good day. Go and make it a great day. This is American Reformation Podcast. Kurt, if people want to connect with you, how can they do so, brother?
I can give you a private email, which would be kurtrohrs11@gmail.com, KURTROHRS11@gmail.com. And I do really appreciate dialogue. I want to commend you for stepping up. This is what I'm asking as a pastor, to step up to show the moral leadership. That's where it belongs. In the home and in the church, not in the schools.
I love it. I love it. This is the American Reformation Podcast. Sharing is caring. Like, subscribe, comment wherever it is you take in these podcasts. And we promise to have great conversations. You know, there's a lot of Lutherans that listen to these podcasts. I know you don't share that, but we share this one thing. Jesus is Lord, and he reigns over all things, and he's going to come back to make all things new. And until that day comes, may he find his people faithful, proclaiming his word. It's a good day. Go make it a great day. Thanks, Kurt. Wonderful work.
Okay, thank you.